Hey, you guys, and welcome back to Out the Dark. We're your hosts. My name is LaCrystal Bradley.
I'm Tiana Roberts.
And today, this episode, we will be speaking about grieving your will. Grieving your will, which is, I guess, kind of grieving the plans that you probably have made for yourself and choosing God's will over yours. Sometimes our will doesn't align with God's will. And it's a grief and a grieving process that comes along with it. Especially for like something that you just really know you really wanted to do, or something you really wanted to have, and you felt like it was so like in your grasp, and God was like, "Nah." And how did you deal with that? You know what I mean? Like receiving His no or not yet, or have something better, but you had your hopes and everything set up on this one particular thing, or maybe it's multiple things. Who knows? But you do. And I feel like when he gave me this episode, I was going through grief. Well, I didn't know I was going through grief. Was getting ready to go through grief. I guess I give him a little backstory of how this episode came about. It was right after our previous episode with Miss Maddie, and I was just still like digesting everything that she had said because that was an amazing. Um, Only for God to say when I asked him like, "Okay, God, what's the next episode?" And he was like, "Grief." And I was like, "Grief." And I said, "Okay, I could possibly see that because what she just went through, maybe we can expound or like tell how we felt or something like that pertaining to it." But I didn't even realize like maybe next week, one of my good friends, I met him when I was working at a plant. He ended up committing suicide. And I was like, okay. And the next thing I heard God say was process the grief. And in the midst of me processing that grief, well, I can't even say I processed it. Because when I first found out about it, I was just like heartbroken, devastated because we had a conversation prior to that. And he had already kind of been talking like that in that, I guess, headspace he was in. And so I was like, we stayed on the phone and I was like, no, you're good. It's going to be okay. And I'm thinking, like he was going to come around. And then the next few days go by, he still was had like the same tone. And then I think it was like maybe that Friday night, he called and I didn't answer the phone. And the next day, that Saturday, is when his family called me, one of his cousins, and was like, you know, TXYZ. And I was like, no. And it just like devastated me and I didn't know how to feel. Of course, Tiana texted you and was like, I feel like I was going through all these emotions. I was numb, I was hurt. I was even questioning God, like, okay, if you calling us to bring people out the dark, like how we gonna do that? And I could even save my friend. And then Tiana, with her therapeutic self, she sent me some encouraging words. And then I was riding to work and I heard God say that you did your job. Like this is you can't be me. You can't play me. I got it from here. Like you did what you needed to do, which was pretty much on the same cuffs as what you was telling me to T. And it was hard. And then so looking back, I feel like that was when God told me to grieve. That was more so twofold because that's my friend. That was my dog. You know what I mean? And so for something like that to happen was very traumatic. Personally, I never experienced anything like that. Nobody close to me, taking their life. That was that was I can't say crazy, but that was like I felt all of the emotions. And then especially talking to him prior to and knowing what his headspace was and how he felt and why he felt like that was the best thing to do. It hurt, and I felt like I grieved, and I feel like I got what I needed, and God comforted me. But even sometimes, like I just think of like a conversation we had prior to him getting that low, and it just And I was like, dang, if we could have just, you know what I mean? Like, maybe if I could have did this, and then I try to stop myself from feeling like that. So, T, have you ever had like an experience or a season where you had to process grief or grieve something?
Yes. I would feel maybe this past season,
Mm-hmm.
I could say. And I think I would say grieving my own expectations. You know, a lot of times I think we come up with like our own imagination of how something should be, or our expectations of how it should be, how it should happen, when it should happen, and the timeline on which it should happen. But that's not always God's plan. And so sometimes it's like maybe it's just me, or I believe it's not, it's more than just me, but a lot of us can, where we go on this like fairy tale um, of expectation of what something could be, and not being in the reality of what it really is. And then so we end up hurting our own selves, but we blame God because we don't want to take the accountability. So I think, just grieving my own expectations and having to accept what reality is. um, I feel like in this past season I've went through a lot of that, and having to lay that down and accept truth and the reality of what things actually are.
I think for me, I can relate to it. Like our expectations. Okay, so let me just tell you, let's take marriage. Okay, because who don't want to be married? And I feel like early on in my walk with God, I was like, oh, just so excited and thinking it's gonna happen at this time. And when that time came, it didn't happen. And I'm like, okay, well, I set another date, and that date then came. All of the dates then came and gone, and it's like, okay, so what do we have? Like, what do I have left? And like, I hear you talking about this one particular thing, and it's like, but it's not happening yet. Um, God had to really tell me about me, and he was brutally honest, and he was like, Christy, you're not ready. And I was like, what you mean? You know, like that's an insult to me. And then like looking back, girl, you wasn't ready, girl. And I feel like just I guess by doing some of the work that he told me I needed to work on for myself, I was like, oh girl, yeah, you really weren't ready. I didn't even know we were still dealing with this. And so yeah, I definitely can see grieving the expectations of something like my timeline. When things, like you said, when things don't go your way, or happen when you think it's supposed to happen. And I think like for me, in this past, I can't even say season, but really since I would say since December of last year, it's like when I really started grieving different situations or things that God told me to walk away from, and I didn't. And then it started to take its toll on me mentally, emotionally, to where it was like I was walking around numb. I think like when you don't process your grief, or you don't really get to the root of the grief, things like bitterness are setting in. Things like the numbness are setting in, which, we have feelings for a reason. We're supposed to feel. And I think it got so bad to where it was like, I think in one of our episodes, I was like, one thing I was stepping into the light doing was sitting down within myself, because I'm always busy. I'm always on the go. And I felt like looking back and thinking about this episode, really and truly, I haven't like processed, I guess, different things or different stages of my life, because this walk with God, let me tell you, it is not easy. You're going to go through some stuff. Things are going to happen. And I feel like for me, another part of the grief, since maybe January, was, how can I put it into words? It's literally, yeah, processing God's will over my will, His will don't always look like mine. It don't always lead me down the path that I would choose for myself. And so being able to grieve that in order to pick up my cross and to follow him has been hard. Like really, really hard. In certain areas. And I'm like, well, you told me this and you told me that. And it's like, girl, but I'm telling you now to do this in order to get that. And sometimes I feel like we as believers think that it's going to be a cakewalk. Like we don't have to literally pick up our cross and walk.
I agree. It makes me think about like, and I think we talked about this with Miss Maddie. You know, a lot of times we want things, and we say we want God's will and plan for our life, but we don't know the cost that also comes with that, and the sacrifice that also comes with that. And you know, there's going to be seasons where things don't happen the way that we think it's going to happen, but it's still in God's plan, but it's just not going to happen when we think. And, you know, the season where we have to go through the whole grieving process and realize our expectations and what we thought was going to be isn't going to be, um, it's hard and it's difficult. And, but it's in those seasons where we grow the most. And, you know, we have the option where we can continue to lean into God. Or, you know, some people do choose to do their own thing, but that still costs. You know, there's still a price to free will. Like there's still a price that you have to pay to stay out of God's will. But I just think like, you know, in those seasons where, you know, the expectation isn't what we thought, but we continue to lean into God, we are able to still see the fruit of that because we're able to grow, and overcome those things, those expectations, and lay those things down and to continue to experience God in a new way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like even with this next phase of my life, like I'm so unsure, but I'm so like God keep reminding me like everything is gonna be okay. Your wings, you're spreading your wings, you're spreading your wings. And I was driving today, and I literally seen on the back of somebody's truck, it was like an eagle with their wings spread out, and God was like, you're getting ready to soar. And it's a saying that say you can't see the forest for the trees, and like that's kind of how I feel. And I'm like, okay, God, I trust you. And I feel like um, being able to grieve is also being able to trust God, because it's like, okay, I'm gonna be vulnerable with this. It hurt. I don't want to let this go, or I don't know how to process this. It may be lost. It may just be, him telling you to walk away from a person or something, and it's like, um, it's hard, but that's where your trust and your faith in God kicks in. That you know that He wouldn't lead you nowhere that's gonna harm you. He's gonna always exchange and offset whatever it is that He's asking you for something greater. But I feel like by us being human and we seeing it from our viewpoint and through our lenses, it's like, oh my God, this is terrifying. But in reality, it's like, no, I got something better for you, but I can't tell you what it is because I want to see, you know what I mean, if you're gonna be able to depend on me and trust me as if like you say you do. And I feel like this has been a really um faith testing season for me, and it make me like look back on what he said the theme of the season was, stepping into the light. Like had I known that all of this was the requirement, I'd be like, oh God, I would have packed a little bit better for the journey. But really and truly, this is really what stepping into the light is. You're stepping out of, like we talked about, the shadows or whatever, but it's like you're really walking into the unknown and being comfortable being led by God. And I would say, I wouldn't call it for me a wilderness season, but I would say this is like an Abram season where you just don't know where he's leading you, but he's telling you to go. And that requires all the faith, all the trust, in order to, like you said, to become who he wants you to become. And when I was thinking and riding today, and I was like, God, why does this hurt so bad? Like, why does this hurt? Not just the loss of my friend, but just like the loss of this this closed door that you're telling me to get out of the threshold so it can close. Like, what is this? And why does it hurt so bad? And he told me, he said, grief is the evidence of how significant the relationship is. And when he said that, I was like, okay, okay, now it makes sense. Like, you really wouldn't grieve anything if it didn't mean nothing to you. And so he was like, I really want to see how much I mean, you know what I'm saying, to you if you can let this go.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, that put so much, like, I guess, substance to what I was feeling and why I was feeling that way. And I was like, okay, so now I understand. I'm grieving this because of the closeness, the close proximity of what I am to this, or what this person, it was to me. Because loss is hard, and for him to say that, it's kind of like, is that relationship more meaningful than the one we have? And so when he put it into that context, I'm like, heck no. So it's like, okay, so what you gonna do? Are you gonna show me? You gonna walk it? You gonna be about your action? And I was like, yeah, yeah, this is big. And I feel like this is also illuminating, kind of like shining a spotlight on me and what I need to like uncover and dig up to kind of like to get to the person that he want me to be.
Hmm. That's so good. I don't know if it was at the conference and Sarah said it, or if it was something I watched.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Sarah though, where the statement was, we grieve things that we had such high hope in.
Yeah,
And like you said, we wouldn't grieve nothing if it didn't have any meaning or any attachment to us. And it's kind of like Abraham when God told him to go and sacrifice Isaac, and it literally said that God knew that Abraham loved Isaac, but he still told him to go and sacrifice. And at the end of the day, Isaac didn't get sacrificed, but that revealed where Abraham's heart and his posture was. So I think, even like you said, in those seasons where we are having to sacrifice things, and lay them at God's feet, that it's not even that. In some instances, it is that those things won't return, those people, places, or things. But sometimes it's those things I'm just taking away temporarily, and once you have grown and matured and I've done the work that I needed to do in you, then I'll return that back. But I think, like you said, a lot of it is God just seeing our heart, and are we continuing to keep him as number one
yeah,
in our walk and in our journey. But yeah, we agree with the things that we once had, we have hope in.
yeah. And then the thing about it is, you don't wanna you don't wanna put that, you know what I mean? Like, you don't wanna seem as if you love this place or this thing or this person more than you love God. It's all a test. And like you said, whether he give it back to you or not, and if he don't, he gonna give you something better.
Better, yeah, so
And
true.
if he do, you'll be the better version of yourself if he was to give you whatever it is that he told you to lay down. But the most important part is lay it down. The
Mm.
first. And
You know, there was something Nidra Glover, she's a therapist, and I get her, like, her emails that come every now and again.
yeah,
And the email that came through today talked about how how we have to make these big decisions. In this case, we're talking about having to sacrifice things and walk away from things, or things that we're having to leave, and we're grieving those things. But how those things also come with guilt,
yeah,
and we then go into, okay, we know God has told me to do this and step away from these things, or person, place, thing, whatever it may be. But there's also a level of guilt that can come along, and not avoiding the guilt, but addressing the guilt and allowing that emotion to have its place, but also dealing with it, and not running from it, because it is. inevitable, I guess you could say, because guilt will try to sneak its way in, or it doesn't even sneak, it comes.
Yeah.
When we have to make big decisions to walk away from things that God has told us to step away from.
And I think you're right. Like guilt is the qualifying agent that keep you from stepping into what it is that God is calling you to do. Like you may feel guilty to leave. You may feel guilty that all kind of things. Like I know for me, I felt guilt. Like when my friend, I'm like, dang, if I would have just answered the phone or if I would have just drove out there. But I feel like it was just delaying the process. Because I feel like his mind was made up. And then like even the current thing, when I said God is telling me to get out the threshold of the door, I feel like guilt kept me there longer than I should have been. And yeah, and then so it went from guilt to like this overwhelming sensation of anxiety. Like I've never dealt with anxiety before, but it was like when I think about leaving, it started making my heart like just, and then when I think about my friend and I'm like, dang, I wish I could have just been. So it was like, to me, it felt like blow after blow after blow. And after then, I started feeling resentful because I feel like after the guilt comes the shame of you being disobedient to God on this one hand. And then on the other hand, it's like, I know what I need. You know what you're supposed to be doing. And then the shame and then the, just, just feeling angry, like this resentment had feelings about. And then I felt like I had resentment towards God to even what it was like, but you told me to do this, you know what I mean? Or you brought this person into my life, XYZ, like how could this happen? Like I said, I felt like I was like, God, if you told us to be doing Out the Dark and I couldn't even help my friend, like what are we doing this for? You know what I mean? Like I had all these crazy questions and I'm not gonna call them crazy because I feel like they was valid because he answered every one of them. But he allowed me the process to go through that. And I think like with grief, we can't just say it's one thing. I feel like it is a ton of emotions, a ton of phases that you go through. It's not just, it can't just be boiled down to one thing. And I have felt pretty much, I feel like all of them, because next was bitterness. Like for the next week, well, after I heard it, I was angry, I was resentful, I was confused, I was numb. And then it's like I went into this, I felt like bitterness was setting in. And I never, like, I think I was that Sunday, because when I found that I was in Atlanta, I didn't even go to church. I was riding home Sunday afternoon, that evening, that night. And I was just like, God, I don't even know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like, I was having a real moment. Like, God, what are we doing here? And um, I just felt like like angry. I felt this bitterness. And he was like, don't let the bitterness sit in. And then he said, bitterness is going to rot the hand that holds it. And he was like, so you have a choice. You can either give me that bitterness or you keep holding it and your hands rot. And there's nothing I can do with your hands if you have this rotten bitterness in them. And so I was like, oh, you ain't even giving me time to work through this. Like, but I feel like he was saying like, okay, you got to hurry up and process this because bitterness, you don't want it to take its roots. So by the time I pulled back up at home, I just completely lost it. Like I sat in my car, everybody got their stuff out. I sat in the car, I cried for about 2 hours, and I feel like I grieved everything. And I needed that. And when I got out the car, and he was like, "Okay, you ready? Like you're good." But I feel like a lot of people don't realize that grief is not just one emotion, but like a cluster of them. And sometimes it don't happen all at once either. It's stages and phases that you go through. Like even when you think you're over something.
I
So
agree.
yeah.
Grief definitely stages. Um, and I think the number one thing out of this is being able to, well, not being able to, but not being scared to run towards the grief.
Mm, yeah.
Press into it, lean into it, because even in those moments, there's growth there.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So if you're grieving, or if you feel like you have to lose something or have lost someone or something, allow yourself to go through the process, but don't get stuck. And even if you have to reach out to a therapist, you have to reach out to somebody, a family member, a friend to talk to, reach out. Like, everybody going through something, but reach out. Get you somebody that you can talk to, you can lean on, and then take it to God in prayer. Like, the best therapist of them all is God. Who knows you better than He do? And so I feel like God can help you work through it. There are books, you can Google books that can help you work through it. Journaling, we're big advocates of journaling. I got a bunch of journals. One of these days I'm gonna show you how. But I have a ton of them. Like, get you some help. Don't sit in it by yourself, because that's what the enemy wants you to do. He wants you to get by yourself in isolation, where he can really like talk you into doing crazy things. And if you feel like you are vulnerable or at risk for self harm, what's that number T that they can call?
988.
Yeah, call the number. Speak to somebody. Um, Life is hard, and nobody's here to condemn you or judge you, but reach out to somebody.
Agree.
So that's it. T, you got anything else to add?
I don't.
All right. Well, we will see you guys next time. Until then, bye.